Hello everyone and welcome back to All About Steph 1 with me, Steph, and today I want to talk about the prizes for certain feeder series and other categories. So this whole video is going to be centered around whether the prize for winning a certain category should be a seat in the next one up. And this whole thing stemmed from the fact that Callum Ilott could potentially have won the Formula 2 championship and ended up without a seat in Formula 1, which is the next category up. This also came to light with the fact that Gianluca Petecof, the winner of the Formula Regional European Championship, has not currently got a Formula 3 seat, which would logically be the next step up. The whole point of a feeder series is to basically feed you into the next one. So if these series aren't managing to promote the best drivers, and especially the winners of the championships, then what is the point in having them? Because you're losing that talent that should be going up and graduating into the next series. In Formula 2 in 2019, we already had a champion that was unable to get onto the Formula 1 grid because there were no available seats and he had no ties specifically to a Formula 1 team. That man was Nick de Vries, and now he currently races in Formula E for Mercedes-Benz EQ, but I'm sure that he would have liked to have had a Formula 1 seat, considering the natural and logical step after Formula 2 is Formula 1. If Callum Ilott were to have won the Formula 2 championship in 2020, he would have been the second driver in only 4 years to have missed out on a Formula 1 seat, which seems absolutely crazy to me. I actually want to talk about W Series for a second, because the prize for winning W Series is $500,000, which is a hefty sum of money, and you could definitely put that to racing in another category. Instead of that $500,000 prize money, it would actually have been way more beneficial for the prize to be a seat in that next category, so that if funding or sponsorship was an issue for someone, that wouldn't be a barrier to stopping them from getting into the next series. I think with lower categories, especially Formula Regional, W Series and Formula 3, it should be fairly easy for us to set up a way for the champion to graduate into the next series. It could be that the prize for winning these series is no longer of monetary value and is just this seat, which I think drivers would most definitely prefer over just the cold hard cash. Or we could maybe have a sponsored seat by a certain sponsor or the FIA in order to promote talent and equality, and to not isolate those who may not have the funds to graduate into the next category of racing. I don't think anyone would necessarily object to the prize for W Series being a seat in Formula 2, or a prize for Formula 3 being a seat in Formula 2, or the prize for Formula 2 being a seat in Formula 1. I don't think that people would necessarily object to that. As racing fans, we definitely want to see the most competitive racing and the closest racing, and the natural way that we're going to get that, apart from adapting machinery, is by having the most talented drivers on the grid. So I think here the argument is not whether the prize for Formula 2 should be a seat in Formula 1, because I think we can all agree that it should. The argument is how we would implement such a reward, and how we would make it fair for Formula 1, for the teams in Formula 1, and for the winners of the Formula 2 championship. But lucky for you, I have come up with some very flawed ways into how we would be able to make this happen. Number 1, perhaps we always have a seat available at a specific team. So for example, Haas, because they need a lot of funding, and maybe this could be funded again by the FIA so that the team doesn't have to take on any financial responsibility for doing this nice thing for the Formula 2 champion and for Formula 1. The issue with this is that having a rookie in the midst might be very, very difficult for the specific team to achieve points in the constructors. There is no sort of continuity, you don't get to keep the drivers for an extended period of time, so you don't get that experience in order to be able to develop the car to keep improving it. So this one is highly flawed and very unrealistic, and so let's go to option 2, which is to have a specific team only of Formula 2 champions. It's going to be funded by the FIA or maybe Formula 1, or maybe we fund it using a tiny bit of the Constructors' Championship money, maybe more than a tiny bit, but this team would consist of Formula 2 champions, 2 of them, so one would be the reigning champion and one would be the champion last year, and then when you want to bring in a new driver, it is the new champion who kicks out the ex-champion. It's very confusing, it makes sense in my head. Again, this constructor would really struggle with development because you don't get to have a driver for long enough to develop the car. It may always be stuck at the back of the grid because you've constantly got very inexperienced Formula 1 drivers. And so yeah, this one is also very problematic because Formula 1 and Formula 1 teams are not cheap to run. And so for the FIA to sponsor a whole team for Formula 2 champions seems a bit bizarre and seems slightly excessive and unrealistic again. I haven't even brought up all of the options regarding what the Formula 2 champion would do. So for example, George Russell and Charles Leclerc, when they won their championships, they had seats lined up, so it was absolutely fine. Mick Schumacher, when he won the 2020 championship, he had a seat lined up, so it was fine. But what if these guys had to go to a mandatory seat and weren't allowed to go to their seats that they wanted to be at? Charles being a Ferrari Junior, what if he wasn't allowed to go to Sauber and he had to do this mandatory time at this hypothetical Formula 2 champions team in Formula 1? Would the champion have to do this mandatory 1 or 2 years at this specific team before being able to go to another team on the grid? It doesn't really seem fair, and this is the whole issue that I'm running into when I'm trying to think of how on earth we could fairly implement a system like this where the Formula 2 champion gets a seat. I've come to the conclusion that there currently is no ethical or sustainable way that we could have a Formula 2 champion on the grid as a prize for winning the championship. And so it might seem really harsh, but I say that no, the prize for Formula 2 should not be a seat in Formula 1, but only because there is no way to regulate it to make it fair at the minute, and I'm all about fairness. Maybe when the budget cap comes in, it will be much easier to fund a team in Formula 1, and so maybe then we could think about our hypothetical 2-person Formula 2 champions lineup team in Formula 1. But until then, I don't think there is a way that we can ensure that it is fair for all the current teams on the grid, all of the current drivers on the grid, and the Formula 2 champion himself or herself in the future. With regards to the prize for feeder series in the lower categories, I still think that it is doable, and I really would want to push the FIA to consider changing the rules and the prizes for each of these categories in order to ensure that the winner is consistently and always going to have a seat in the next category up. For someone like Gianluca Petecof to miss out on a Formula 3 seat after winning the championship in Formula Regional, it seems like such a shame that that talent is going to waste just because he doesn't have sufficient funding to put himself through the next category. It seems despicable that someone like Nikita Mazepin could have a seat in Formula 1 over someone like Callum Ilott, who was a real championship contender throughout the entire season, but that's where money gets you. We Racers 1 is massively attempting to improve equity and promote equal opportunity, yet a lot of the time the poorer drivers are forgotten and they don't get that same opportunity as other people. Regardless of what the current prizes are for these series, the FIA, Formula 1 and the feeder series need to come to an arrangement in order to ensure that talent is not being lost through the cracks and for all reasons due to lack of sponsorship or lack of funding. We need to ensure that there is a focus on promoting talent so that drivers with exceptional ability are not lost to the sport and they are still able to have the opportunities that other drivers have, regardless of their financial situation. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any ideas as to how we would fairly implement a system in which the Formula 2 champion gets a seat in Formula 1, because my ideas are just very unrealistic and they're not going to happen. So let me know if you have a better one down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, do not forget to drop it a like down below and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. We are currently on the road to 1K, so any subs will be much appreciated. But thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. I will see you in the next one.